Welcome to the podcast, Chantel.
Hi. How are you, Shannon?
I'm doing great and I'm happy to talk to you
I'm
because
excited to be here.
we've been messaging on Instagram for a long time. And I was like, let's learn more about you and see what's going on here.
I appreciate the invite. Thank you.
I am excited to talk to you about how you got here. I'm always interested in people that are in the niche in different capacities and how they got here, because there has to be a moment where you're like, I'm not just a casual visitor. Let me turn this into a job. So can you tell a little bit more about your background and how you came to do this?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Before I tell you about my background, I just want to tell a fun story about Shannon. And she doesn't even know this, but I have been listening to the podcast for probably about 10 years. I remember when we were planning, I would say my first major trip to Walt Disney World. I'm a Disneyland guru. I can do Disneyland up the side, one down. I know how to do Disneyland. But Disney World was very overwhelming. And I remember I found you on Instagram somehow. And then I got to your podcast.
Mhm.
And then I started listening, and my kids would be like, WDW Prep School to go. And they totally know the jingle and everything.
WW Prep to go.
There you go. That's it. So anyway, and it was like my go-to for planning my Walt Disney World trip. So thank you for that, because I have been a fan for years. And if you told me like 10 years ago when I was listening to your podcast that I would eventually be on your podcast, I would have said, no way, no how. So thank you for having me. This is like a big deal for me and an honor.
I am happy to have you. And it is very complimentary, because when people say, hey, what is the Disneyland version of your information? We always send them your way. So we can go back and forth.
Yes, definitely. And I appreciate that. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Arizona, still live in Arizona. So I'm not like next to Disneyland. Unlike a lot of creators for Disneyland, they are locals. I am not a local. So that is something that's unique about me, is I am also a traveler. On my destination to Disneyland, I have to book a trip. I have to figure out how I'm going to get there, where I'm going to stay, how many days I'm going to be there. I have to budget everything. It's just like a regular guest going to Disneyland. So grew up in Arizona, and my grandparents owned a travel agency. And the travel agency, I watched my grandma, she would go on tours and she would take all these people, groups, places. And it was fascinating to me to watch her like plan and schedule and do all these things. She actually took me my very first time to Disney World when I was 10. And I didn't go back until I was like 20 something. So it was a long time, but she took my first trip. Then my parents growing up, because we lived in Arizona, we would drive to Disneyland. We probably went to Disneyland maybe every other year, but I've been going since I was 3. So I grew up going to Disneyland, loved Disneyland. When I got married, my husband had never been to Disneyland, and I was appalled. So what is wrong? Anyway, but he grew up in a family with 8 kids. It was like just not something they could afford. And I totally appreciated that. And so I thought, you know what? Going forward, I want to be able to go with my family, but I want to be able to do it affordable and on a budget and understand. So I was really diligent in planning our trips to Disneyland. We took the kids to Disneyland pretty frequently just because I wanted them to have those special memories. So I took our family. I have a set of twins, a boy and a girl. They're now 19. So it's been a long time that I've been planning on going to Disneyland with kids. And now, I'm about 6, 7 years ago, Instagram was still very new. And I was like, you know what? I have people ask me all the time, what are your deals? How do you go? Where do you stay? How do you, back then, how do you get a fast pass? Where do you park? All these questions. And they knew that I went frequently. And I'm like, I'm just going to put here on this little Instagram page, I'm going to just put some tips, and I'm just going to tell my friends, this is where you can go to look for it. My intention was never to become this person who shared about Instagram and in stories and constantly talking about Disneyland every day for the past 7 years, but that's what it's turned into. And I love it. I'm a teacher by profession. So I love
That would be why the content feels familiar, because we focus so much on teaching.
Yes, because I love to be like, okay, this is your first step, and then you do B, and then you do C. And if D doesn't work out, then go back over here. And so I always like to give a step-by-step version. And so I think the teacher in me loves helping people just plan and execute, maximize their day. And so this has really turned into more of a love of teaching them how to do Disneyland. And it's changed. It's always constantly changing. It's evolving. It's changed since when I took little kids to Disneyland. so much has changed and happened. So I really enjoyed the teaching aspect of it and just helping families make the most out of their day. And there's so many options. Unlike Disney World, at Disneyland, we only have 3 Disney properties and they're right there, but there's so many right across the street that are just as close, if not closer, and more cost effective and budget friendly. And so I have stayed at probably 30 plus hotels in the area. So I feel like I can speak to my audience and be like, this is where you want to stay. This has breakfast. This doesn't. This is close. This blah, blah, blah. And this is where you park and all the things. And I feel like I can do that now. And that was never my intention when I started. It was just, hey, let's talk about Disneyland. But here we are 7 years later. And I feel like it's just, first of all, I'm honored to be on your podcast because what you do for Walt Disney World, I really do feel like I do for Disneyland. And I help people just so they can understand. And I think the satisfaction of when I hear back from a guest, hey, thanks, I used this tip or I did that. And it just makes me happy.
It's such a good point that you do things in this specific way, because I feel like most people that are your competition are more like influencers and not necessarily focus on education. So although you are primarily Instagram and you would maybe technically be considered an influencer, you are doing something different in that you are focused on the teaching.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is why it appeals to me. Because I'm like, yeah, it's fun to see people go to the parks, but tell me how you did it and what are the tips and the strategies with that. We have the thing in common where we don't live near the parks. So we have to plan trips just like everyone else, which I think is an advantage in many ways. But the business of running a Disneyland focused business and a Disney World focused business are very different. And in part because of what you just said, which is all those offsite hotels. And it's very different, right? We focus on site hotels almost 100%. And so we're not getting any promotions or reward points for that. It's a different thing. And I just find that sort of fascinating. I remember messaging you one time and asking you a question, and you said something about you had never had an annual pass at Disneyland. Right. And I was fascinated because I could not get away with that with Disney World.
Yes. And prior to this, so when my kids were growing up, we had an annual pass one year when they were in kindergarten. And I took advantage of that. But then once they were like in school, I was like, I didn't feel like I could pull them. And so it just didn't make sense for us to have an annual pass. And I didn't go as much when they were younger because I wasn't doing this job. Mm-hmm. Now that I am in the Instagram world and I'm there, that's my job. Yeah, I've had an annual pass now for the past 4 or 5 years, but I wasn't an annual pass holder. And people do find that fascinating. They're like, how did you go? And I'm like, I made it work. I figured out, okay, these are the tickets. This is the best price. This is the best deal. When is it less crowded and the tickets are less expensive? Or, okay, let's go for only 3 days instead of 5. You can do Disneyland in smaller increments as well, unlike Walt Disney World, where when you go, you want to make the bang for your buck. And so you go for those 7, 10 days, whatever it is, because it's a vacation and it's a destination and you're in the bubble. You can be in the bubble at Disneyland, but you can also just get a lot done in just 3 days. And so we would try and do that. And back in the day when I would get on Priceline and book Priceline, there were just so many tricks and things that I did back then to make it affordable. And today I do those same things, but I do it differently. I have to explain, okay, you know what? You can park hop, but you don't have to park hop. You can do Disneyland for the whole day, or there's just all different sorts of things now. But it's important to understand how that has evolved and changed too.
It has. And we usually go to Disneyland a couple times a year, and it's never made sense for us to have annual pass or Magic Key because we just get the tickets each time and it's a shorter trip. So it makes sense. Anyway, the finances of it and the strategies of it are just very interesting to me. So how often do you go to Disneyland?
So I am a Magic Key holder, like I said. So I go at least once a month, usually between going with whether it's other Disney influencer friends that I have, or I'm going because I was invited to check out a hotel. I get a lot of hotels in the area that want me to come and share about their hotel so that I can speak to the reasons why you'd want to stay there. I also work very closely with the city of Anaheim, with Visit Anaheim, and they bring me out to come and check out things other than just Disney as well, like food places. And this summer I did like a 5 theme park. We would in Southern California, there's Knott's Berry Farm, there's a Legoland, Disneyland, Universal, and SeaWorld. So we have like several that you can go to. And so I came and I did a whole big piece about coming to visit Anaheim and then going to these other locations. So it's not always just Disneyland when I'm there. That is my focus and that is my passion and my love. But like you mentioned, I have branched out and I do other things now too. And I love to go to Walt Disney World. I just don't get there as often. Like I was there in May, planning another trip in March, but I don't get there as often because it's just so much further away. And when I go, I want to stay for 10 days.
Speaking of that, you recently did a name change. So
I did, yes. Let me explain a little bit about that.
Yeah.
I do have a website. So my website is DisneylandTourGuide.com. And I know you've referred people to that, which by the way, when people come to me and ask me, who does Walt Disney World like you do Disneyland? I can't find anyone. I'm like, oh, Shannon's your girl. So anyway, so my website is DisneylandTourGuide.com. And that's where you can find all of I would say 90% of it is Disneyland content. I have a little bit of Walt Disney World, a little bit of Legoland and some other thing, but majority is Disneyland. And when I started this, like I told you, my passion was Disneyland, always focused Disneyland. And so my Instagram handle was the same, Disneyland Tour Guide. Mm-hmm. And it's been that for the past 7 years. Over the summer, like I said, I went to all these amusement parks. I did 2 different cruises, went on a Disney cruise, a Royal Caribbean cruise. Celebrated 25 years with my husband and wedding anniversary. We went to a Sandals resort. So I'm like doing all these other things because I love to travel. And I'm like, I'm not just about Disneyland anymore. Yes, if you get on my account, you're going to see, I would say still 80% Disneyland. But I have this other portion where I talk about tips going to Universal Studios because people come to Disneyland and they want to go to Universal. And they're like, how do you do Universal? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know because I hadn't been in so long. So I want to be your go-to for all things tour guide. Like any place you want to go, any destination, you can come and you can find other information. My focus is still going to be Disneyland, but I'm going to be the magical tour guide. So I changed my Instagram name to Magical Tour Guide just to encompass so much more than just the Disneyland niche, which I love, and it will always still be there. And that's what my focus on my website is. But now I feel like I can share other destinations and locations and things and tips, same way I do about Disneyland, but it's just for a different location. Like I love Disney cruises. We've been cruising on Disney for years and just got off the Wish. And I talk forever about the Wish. I loved that. And I know you were recently on the Wish. I mean, there's just so much more that I wanted to do. And so just changing my name on Instagram, and that's the only where I've changed it, is just Magical Tour Guide. You can still find me there. And I'm going to share about Disney, all sorts of Disney, Walt Disney World, Disneyland. But my website, DisneylandTourGuide.com, is where all of like you can't say everything on Instagram. You just have that little teeny tiny little script you can, and share so much in stories.
You do push it to the limit in like the captions, and you share. It's really like content heavy for Instagram, which is, I think, is a unique way to use it, since most of the time it's just like funny short captions.
Right.
It's almost like mini blog posts.
Yes, I know. Yeah. And that's how I started when I started Instagram, because I started my Instagram account in 2017 and I built my website most of 2019. Like it took me a while to create a website and just decide, okay, go for it, do this, because I had no idea what I was doing. And I launched my website, get this, January 2020. Talk about terrible timing. 3 months later, the parks closed. And I was like, oh my gosh.
And Disneyland was closed for a long time.
It was. So anyway, that was a little bit of a rough start, but it's going great now. My website is just full of so much that I can't put on Instagram. So if you want a deep dive and you want what Shannon does on her website, you just go to my website for Disneyland content and you'll find it there. Instagram only lets me put this much.
So I know you from Instagram and I knew you had the website. Are there any other platforms, or are those the 2 main ones?
Those are the 2 main ones. I probably have like my name on, or I do have my name like on Twitter and Facebook, all these little places, but I don't like, I hardly ever post over there. So
yeah,
that's where you'll find is Instagram and Google Disneyland Tour Guide.
So you mentioned that you mostly focus on Disneyland, but you do other things. How often do you get to do Disney World, Disney Cruise, these other sort of related things?
I would say probably twice a year I try and do, or like to go do something. I mean, if I'm in Southern California at Disneyland, I've been to Legoland numerous times. I've been to Universal. I would say Universal more so because it's not too far to go to LA. But Walt Disney World, I try and go about twice a year. I would love to go more, but I went to Universal Orlando for the first time in January. That was really fun. I had a great time there. And like I took my daughter to New York over Christmas last year. And
Mhm.
so I talked about that and just shared about that because the way I tour, the way I go on vacation is going to be the same. I talk about
Mhm.
Disneyland going anywhere else. We went to Chicago a couple years ago. I talked about that. Just different destinations. I'm going to talk about how I plan it because I'm just a planner by nature. So if you want to go there, great. And we're planning a trip to Hawaii. I'm going to Aulani in December.
Mhm.
So again, that's another destination that's not Disneyland, but it's Disney. And I'm really excited about that. And that's going to be fun. And just, I enjoy the planning part, just as you do.
Yes, obviously, it's a specific personality type that we're appealing to the same kind of person, I think, in that way. And it doesn't exist a lot for Disneyland. You know
Right.
what I mean? It did exist a lot for Disney World. We're one of several. But for Disneyland, I find it hard to find that specific information.
Yeah. Cause most of it's are like local people that have a magic key and they love to just go and they share about the treats or the shows or whatever, what's going on currently. And I do stay very current with all my information because I'm there once a month about.
Mhm.
But I'm not oh, okay, this merchandise just dropped. Here's a
Right.
picture. That's not my focus. There are plenty of those accounts,
Exactly.
but
I was
I'm
gonna
just,
say.
okay, you want to go on a trip to Disneyland? Let me tell you how to make it the most magical and most efficient.
That's right. And it's one of my biggest passions in life is getting people that are Disney World people to go to Disneyland because I'm like, I promise you, once you get there, you're going to understand why I'm so in love with it. But I can't do too much past the basics because like you're not keeping up with the merchandise. Neither am I. And I also am not keeping up with the level of strategy that you are. So
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to say, I know you're going to love it. Here, go find, go follow Chantel and she'll help you.
I appreciate that. And when people are like, I'm so overwhelmed, where do I start with Walt Disney World? I'm like, you just got to dig in. It really, you have to plan. You can go without planning, obviously, but man, there's just so much. Your trip goes so much better if you like, no, and things are different. Like people are like, oh, it's the same. No, like lightning lanes. And when you can get Disney Genie and all of that stuff is so different coast to coast. And so you might understand what Disney Genie is, but how to get it and when to get it in Walt Disney World is so very different than Disneyland. It's
Yeah.
just,
I do find it hard not to constantly compare
yeah.
because it looks so similar. Everything, Genie Plus exists on both coasts. We recently did a trip that included doing VIP tours. I, in my head, was comparing the VIP tour methods on both coasts. It's hard not to constantly compare, but there are differences. It's just funny because it's all Disney. And so you would think there would be exactly the same or almost the same, but it's absolutely not.
Yeah, I found
So,
that fascinating. I listened to your podcast that you just recently went to
mhm.
Disneyland and you were talking about the crowds, which yes, over the years. So in Arizona and Utah, California, Washington, kind of all those states, majority of us have a fall break now, which didn't
Mhm.
exist when I was young. Growing up, we just had a spring break. So those first 2 weeks of October are now just, and then you throw in the holiday in there and you've got Columbus Day. So kids are out of school for that. Plus people are off of work. It's just October used to be a nice, like easy time to go, but it's not anymore. It's very crowded. So I'm glad you did a VIP tour when you were there though.
So glad too. But the VIP tour guides were surprised. And so I was like, oh, maybe it's a new thing out here.
Yeah. No, that was the past couple years. It's just gotten increasingly more as I noticed different districts. And when they, like here in Arizona, we have some districts that are gone out for 2 weeks for fall break. Because think about it, the weather in Arizona is horrible in the summertime. So they get the kids back into school earlier. And then when the weather's nicer in October, okay, go have a 2 week break.
Yeah. Yeah. That's nice. I like that. As a person who lives in Texas,
Yeah.
it's miserable in the summer. So that's really nice. But like Disneyland specific, let's talk about Disneyland. It's
Okay.
very fun. It's personally, it is my happiest place on earth because I find it absolutely charming. And
Mhm.
anyway, so I just like talking about what is your favorite of the three on-site hotels?
Oh, that is a hard one. I have not stayed at the new, it's going to be Pixar Place. I'm staying there like 3 days after Rethemed reopens. So I'm excited about that. I never honestly had an interest to stay there when it was Paradise Pier. It just, I don't know, it didn't interest me.
You
I've
didn't miss
stayed at both the
anything.
Grand and yeah, I've stayed at both Grand and Disneyland Hotel. I'll tell you, so the Grand for convenience, I love. It's beautiful there and it has its own private entrance right there into Disney California Adventure. And that it's fantastic. But I love the nostalgia of the Disneyland Hotel. My grandma took me there. I see there's a little girl. I have more of a connection to the Disneyland Hotel, but that's because of my age. And I love just the retro feel. Like you can go in the lobby and you can go around. There's like a wall. It has all these old Walt pictures and just old stuff of Disneyland. I remember when the monorail used to come around to the Disneyland Hotel, all these things. To me, I think because I have a connection to Disneyland Hotel, it is my favorite by far.
It is my favorite in the United States of any Disney hotel. And I've stayed at all of them multiple times. I love it. And you were talking about the Grand California being convenient because it has its own entrance to California Adventure, which is very convenient. But in my head, I just tell myself the Disneyland Hotel has easy access to Disneyland because the monorail goes right there. And so I'm like, it has easy access to a park if you count the monorail. But
Yeah.
it's just so charming. And also the Club Lounge is one of my favorites there.
Oh,
as
yes.
well.
We did that last year at Christmas for the first time. And just the views and being up there was like, anyway, Santa came and read like stories to the kids. It was just so magical. I was like, I didn't think Disneyland at Christmas time could get any better. But I'm telling you, it was magical.
That is the best. I love it so much. Okay, then there's a lot more offsite options. What are a couple of your favorite of the offsite?
So they're an offsite. Okay, so I have to categorize them by the ones that are like on Harbor, right across the street from Disneyland, that you can see from like the Monroe when you're riding around, right offsite, and they're within walking distance. If I have to choose one, it's probably the Howard Johnson because they remodeled in the past like 3 to 5 years, the majority of their rooms, and they're this cute retro vibe and just clean and bright. And they have 2 queens in them. And I just love the convenience of where they're located. Howard Johnson is by far like my just favorite across the street because of those reasons. Now, if you're looking for someplace that has a breakfast, because it doesn't have breakfast. So some people are like, no, we want a hotel that has a breakfast. So that's where I have a few favorites. Like, I just love Embassy Suites in general. I love their breakfast, but they're far. They're a bus ride. They don't have you have to get on they don't have something that happened since the parks reopened is hotels used to have their own shuttles. The majority of them did not bring their shuttles back. So you use the Anaheim Resort Transportation System, which is fine. It's a bus system. But if you are staying further away from the parks, then you have to use that and rely on the bus system or Uber or Lyft. So one that is still walkable, it's a 10-minute walk. So it's a little further than the Howard Johnson, but it's the Element. And they opened like just before the parks reopened. Like they were built and brand new when the parks closed in 2020 and they never had a chance to open. So they opened. So they're like a brand new hotel and it's called the Element by Westin. And they have a fantastic breakfast. It has lots of healthy options, lots of options for just everyone in your group. It's fantastic. And like I said, it's walkable. So that is another favorite is the Element. And then if I were just going for, I don't know, there's the Viv, which is off property, but like further away, but it feels like almost a deluxe hotel for a moderate price. That's what I love about the Viv is your pricing. So that's another fun thing is I've been able to see these different hotels and be like, okay, this pricing seems like really great and on budget, but this hotel needs some work. Because think about a lot of these hotels have been there since 1955. And so the ones across the street, I have been leery of, but recently did tours of most of them and they have been updated. And I did a YouTube video about just the ones that are directly across the street because I was fascinated with, okay, these hotels have been here for a long time. And I've been leery of going to them because even an upgrade or a refresh, you can tell, but they have some great options. So I do have a YouTube video about that, but we can talk about that later. But anyway, I do enjoy the hotels that offer breakfast because that's a nice perk. So you want to look at that. Parking is another one. So if you are driving, most of the hotels are now charging parking, whereas before they weren't charging very much for parking. So you got to take that into consideration. And then how close are they on the bus route? So like you can use the bus route, which I use all the time. But some routes are harder than others. And so you just want to make sure you're definitely on a bus route. The Hyatt House is another favorite of mine. It is within walking distance and they have like fantastic rooms and sometimes have like suites. So do you need a suite? I just feel like a lot of the hotels offer like a room that cuts off, what's the word I'm looking for? Closes off. So like you can have like king and then you've got like bunk beds or something. And there's a lot of like kid suites. So there's so many options when it comes to Disneyland. It's a little overwhelming.
I was going to say, this is really pinging my interest in analysis because there's so many things, data points.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to be able to walk? Do you need breakfast? And how many do you need in a room? Those are like the things I asked like off the top. And I'm like, okay, if it's a price point, then go to these particular hotels. Castle Inn and Suites is another one that's fantastic. It's down the street. You stayed at the Anaheim Hotel, which I've stayed at too. Cute, charming. I love their vibe. Their pool. I have stayed there. A little further down is the Castle Inn and Suites, owned by this cute couple I know personally. And they have been there since 60 something. So the hotel is older, but they've refreshed it. And it's castle beam, so it's fun. So that's another charming hotel right across the street from Disneyland. So there really are so many to choose from, but they don't have a breakfast. So people are like, oh, it has to have a breakfast. Okay, there's this option and this option too if you don't want breakfast. So there's McDonald's right down the street. So it gets to be, yeah, you're right. Data points. Okay, well, what's most important? What do I need?
Yeah, it's very funny because so many of them do offer breakfast in Disney World planning. That's not really a big factor since Disney World hotels don't offer breakfast.
I'm always like, that just means I have to go to Jolly Holiday when I get to Disneyland and eat breakfast. So.
Yeah. So speaking of Jolly Holiday, do you have a favorite character meal at Disneyland?
Oh, definitely the Plaza Inn. Right there, the heart of Disneyland, right there, the hub. The characters are, you're guaranteed to see Minnie, usually like Tigger and Pooh. And they have some rare characters like Eeyore sometimes will come out and they have Chip and Dale. I mean, they just rotate through different characters. But what I love about the Plaza Inn is, I don't know, I guess because I'm right there in Disneyland, the views, I love to sit out and you can see the castle. That's definitely my favorite. I've done all that. They're really, and unlike Disney World, there are only 3 really character breakfasts. So there's the Plaza Inn right there in Disneyland. There's right there at the Grand Californian Storytellers, which is a character breakfast in the morning, breakfast only. And then Goofy's Kitchen, which is fun. And it's right there at the Disneyland Hotel. But of the 3, and then there's a really expensive Princess Adventure. I wish they still had the one they did on the pier years ago with the princesses, but they don't. Anyway, so the only princess one is, and I've never done that one because I'm like, I don't have a daughter I don't want to take my teenager or my young adult now. She doesn't want to do it. So we haven't done that one, but that would be your 4th option. So those really I think the best option is the Plaza Inn and just being there in Disneyland.
The randomness of the characters there is so thrilling and weird. And it feels like such a fever dream because you don't know who's coming out.
I know.
You don't. But the others, I've done all of them except the princess one. And I think they're all really fun in different ways.
Yes. Yeah.
But the Plaza Inn is very interesting because of the characters.
Yes.
And it is nice that it is in the park as well.
Yeah.
So that's fun. What about the newer things at Disneyland? What are your thoughts on some of them? Like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway hasn't been open that long. The new towers open at Disneyland Hotel, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so I'm really excited. I mentioned about Pixar Place and the new retheming of that hotel. I have seen like parts that are already done, and I'm really excited about the theme of that hotel. So that's going to be fun. Another new thing we have is San Francisco, which is over there in DCA. And they revamped the Pacific Wharf, and it's all this Baymax and Big Hero theming. And it is super cute. They did a really good job with that. And I love going over there because of the dining. Like right there, it's like a food court. You've got Lucky Fortune. You've got the Cocina Cucamonga, the Mexican restaurant. the new Aunt Cass, which used to be Pacific Wharf Cafe. And you've got these different varieties. So I'd love to go over there. It's really fun. Check that out the next time, because that's probably new to a lot of people because it's just it just reopened, I should say. And Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, it was not new to me because I had ridden it 2 other times at Walt Disney World. But it is new to the parks. And I love that we have another ride, and it just revived Toontown. I love Toontown. I think it's adorable and cute, but I feel like so many people never got back there. Like they get to Fantasyland and that's about as far as they'd go with their kids. And I'm like, but there's more back there. So I'm really glad that it got just a spruce and excitement and a reason to go back there again.
Yeah, I feel like it's hidden because you have to go underneath the little bridge and then it opens up that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And then not the Adventureland Tower, but the Disneyland Tower, the new DVC Tower, I just watched it as it's been being built. I have not been, just seen videos. I'm headed back in 4 days, and they've got a new restaurant opening like November. I think maybe it's tomorrow. Anyway, I plan to go there and go check that out. But it looks like it's a beautiful new addition to the Disneyland Hotel. So that's fun. But I have not personally been there yet.
Yeah. Are you a DVC owner?
No.
Me either.
No. So no, I'm like, we looked into it years ago, but I just decided I know how to do Disney and I'm going to do it this way. And DVC is a great option for some people.
It is. And people that are DVC owners seem to love it.
Yeah.
I've never been able to make it make sense for me.
Yeah.
So there is that. What about things that are coming to Disneyland, or are there things that you're excited about?
Okay, so let me think about what is new that we're like anticipating, because so the hotel, I think that's the thing I'm most excited about.
That's a big one.
That will change early entry. That is something that is going to be on my radar. And I have a stay at the Grand like right after they change early entry. So early entry currently, you can go to either Disneyland or Disney California Adventure on your early entry. If you're a hotel guest, you get 30 minutes into either park, and you decide starting January 20th, that's changing to, it will just be either Disneyland or DCA, which is how it used to be years ago when you stayed on property. They had, I think it was like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday was one park, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday was another park. And so it'll be interesting to see how they do that and how that affects rope drop, because currently I feel bad for guests that are coming that the majority of the people don't stay. There's so many hotels, like I've said, off-site. So they're not staying on site. So they don't get that 30-minute earlier entry. And while at DCA, Radiator Springs Racers is not part of early entry, they do allow those guests to go get in that line. So if you're going for rope drop and you're not an early entry guest and you get there at the park, even 7:45, you are already looking at people in line because they were there for early entry. Then all the rope droppers who got there at 7, who are already ahead of you, and people go and get in that line. I did it one time just to test it because I was like, okay, I want to show people don't do this and why. And so I got there at 7:45 and I was standing right there by Carthay Circle. They drop the ropes and you start going. And by the time I got up to the line, just to even stand in the line for Radiator Springs Racers, it said a 75-minute wait. And I'm like, this is such a waste of time in the morning. You could be doing so many other things. Anyway, I feel like that is going to change once early entry changes and there's not an early entry option. Then it will just be the rope droppers that you're fighting against. And if you can get there early enough, then you have a chance to not have to wait hour, 75 minutes just to ride on that ride. And that one's hard because there's not a good time to ride that. I would say buy an individual lightning lane or just single rider because the line's always long.
Yeah, it's tough. Even on the last trip, bought individual lightning lanes and the wait was still really long because apparently the attraction had gone down. It makes the individual.
And that's another thing you run into. You run the risk of, will it even be open when the park opens? Because that happens
a lot.
Yeah, a lot more than I.
Speaking of that, we've talked about offsite hotels, but the offsite hotels don't have magic mornings and things.
No, there's no perk. They're good neighbor hotels, but other than that, there's no perk to staying at those. Your perks are only going to be at the 3 resorts on property for Disney, and it's the 30 minutes. But there's no advantage like at Walt Disney World with lightning lanes and booking those in advance. That does not exist at Disneyland.
Yeah, which is good and bad because it's Disneyland is easier in terms
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Genie and all that kind of stuff because it's
It
less,
is.
little less competitive. So that is in our little charts comparing that would go on there. One of the things I can almost guarantee when Disneyland people visit Disney World is that they're going to be really interested in the World Showcase because it's like unique and it's not something that's at Disneyland. Are there certain trends you've noticed when Disney World people do Disneyland, like things they're into or questions they ask or confusion points or anything like that?
Okay, so park hopping. They're like,
Mhm.
wait, what? It's like right there. You can see it from the gate, from gate to gate. It's not even a 1 minute walk. So they're fascinated by that. They can't comprehend because for you guys to park hop, it can be an hour. So park hopping is very intriguing to them. Different things that we have, like our Avengers Campus, which is very different and not something that you guys have. And so I actually have on my blog, I have Walt Disney World pros coming to Disneyland because I want to make sure that they do the things, the attractions that you guys don't have, because it's harder, the reverse roles. Like usually when I'm going to Walt Disney World, there's so many things that we don't have at Disneyland.
Mhm.
But there are very few things that we have that are unique to Disneyland. The Matterhorn. People are like, oh, it's just Expedition Everest. No, it's not. It is not Expedition Everest.
It will
And
beat you up.
yeah, yeah. And even like Radiator Springs Racers, it's not Test Track. It's the right same ride vehicle, but it is such a cute little ride. Like it's so different. So I really try and help people. Okay. And like our Pirates is like longer and it's different. Yes, it's the same concept, but I think it's better. But like you said, I try not to compare them, but I also want people not to miss. And so I'm like, okay, you got to make sure you do this just because it's the same attraction on coast to coast. Like our Haunted Mansion is different. Your Haunted Mansion has more rooms. I love your Haunted Mansion. Not that I don't love ours, but ours gets the holiday overlay, which you guys don't get. So you want to make sure you're doing that if you're coming anytime from September to January. So those are the kind of things like Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway. It's the same attraction. The line is different. The queue is different. But I'm like, okay, if you're running out of time, then skip the actual attraction. So there are things that I like to try and make sure people, and even like food, like churros, you want a churro at Disneyland.
The food is better. A lot of the food is better there.
Food is better at Disneyland.
Yeah. I think my number one thing on this is just because the ride has the same name doesn't mean you should skip it at Disneyland.
Yes.
You should not. Now, Disneyland people going to Disney World, most can skip it because the Disneyland version is better. But oh my gosh, don't skip Pirates of the Caribbean, like you said.
Yes.
Don't skip most things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
'Cause
And so attractions and then like shows like our Fantasmic, like I don't know. I love our Fantasmic. Granted, it's not around right now. It's it's sadly not there. But anyway, Fantasmic I think is so much better at Disneyland. It's a totally different experience than it is. And the only thing I wish we had a seat like you guys do in Walt Disney World. But other than that, in Tower of Terror and now we have Guardians, like it's the same ride vehicle, but it's a completely different experience. You cannot skip that one.
Completely different.
Yeah. So anyway, so I feel like there are just a lot of things. So I have like a step by step. Okay, these are the things you don't want to miss when you're coming. And size is a big one. Weather's another one. And like it's not humid in California. It's a dry heat and it's usually really pleasant weather most of the year, honestly. So the weather's different. Our monorail, totally different than you guys. Our monorail is not like a transportation. Let's get you from A to B. Our monorail is like a ride. Let's see the views. So there are things that people are like, wait, your monorail, what? And I'm the same way. When I go to Walt Disney World, I'm like, wait, the monorail takes me to another park and is transportation and is useful? Not ours isn't useful, but anyway, it's just different.
Speaking of transportation, let's go to Disney World. Have you been in the Skyliner?
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. It reminds me of my childhood. Riding the Skyliner was the Skyway at Disneyland. But yes, I love the Skyliner. I am a big proponent of stay at a resort that is on the Skyliner. I just love it. It's just another ride.
It is. I know there was a lot of skepticism when it was being built, but it's become very popular.
Yes.
And I personally love that there's values and moderates along the Skyliner.
Yes.
Because I feel like that's a great value to
spend
not a maximum amount of money and have a non-bus option. So
And that is one thing I love about Walt Disney World is you guys have value, moderate, deluxe options on property. We don't have that at Disneyland. It's like our value is the Pixar place, and that's not a value property price. That is not a budget hotel. Unlike if you stay at Art of Animation, Pop Century over at Walt Disney World, those are great value resorts and they offer so much.
Absolutely. Including the Skyliner. Do you have favorite things at Disney World, like favorite resort?
So I loved Pop Century. When I took my mom, I just loved the vibe and all. Just so fun. So fun. Loved that. And Beach Club. Oh, I fell in love with Beach Club. The pool, the location right there by Epcot to walk in and out and all the boardwalk around it. I would say my heart is definitely, I haven't stayed. Yacht Club's very similar. I think just right there. I think Boardwalk would be fun, but I loved the pool area and the convenience of Beach Club. I really love Beach Club. And I've never stayed at any of the monorail ones. So that the Contemporary or Polynesian is on my list. I would love to stay there. But stayed at Animal Kingdom Lodge in January, and that was so fun. Loved we had a Savannah View room. That was really amazing to come back to that in the afternoon and be like, look at all the animals. And I loved that. So I would say probably Beach Club and Pop, like moderate. I have stayed at Caribbean Beach and I enjoyed that one. That one was fun. I'm wanting to stay at, you have talked about, and this is from early podcast years, ever since you talked about Riverside, Port Orleans Riverside. Want to stay at one of those as a moderate because they just look so fun. They're just theming and anyway. So that's one of my
Riverside used to be our favorite moderate by far, but the other moderates they're almost like tied. Just depending on what you're into. So we actually really like Grand Disney Tower at Coronado Springs a lot. And it has a club level that is more affordable. It's nice to have a moderate with a club level. So it just depends on what you're into. But our next trip is at French Quarter. So just a mix of everything. They all have something to offer. I used to hate Caribbean Beach Resort. It was my least favorite in all of Disney World. And now I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. So it's really nice. Fun. So the fact that the Skyliner is there is obviously a huge perk. But also they did everything better. The food and everything. So anyway, pros and cons of really everything.
Right.
But that obviously when you have an analysis obsession, there's so many things to analyze at Disney World.
I know. There's so many to choose from. You guys have so many to choose from. But a lot of people feel when they're like, where do you stay at Disneyland? I'm like, oh, that's a hard question. There's so many options.
Your offsite list is long.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Pros and cons of your offsites. So that's nice. What do you have coming up? Do you have some upcoming trips, upcoming things related to your business?
Yeah. Okay. So I leave on Monday, actually, for a Disneyland trip. The holidays start at Disneyland like on Friday of next week. So I'm there. I love to watch the transition of the holidays because people are always like, am I going to see anything Christmas? I'm like, yeah, you're going to see it like before Halloween's even over. But anyway, I have a Disneyland Just Space my holiday trip planned in November. Then in December, like I said, I'm going to Alani. Then January, I'm back at the Grand and then Pixar Place for a change of the early entry because I want to see how that affects guests and how to work strategies and park. Because that early entry affects those that have early entry and those that don't. And I love to help my rope droppers. So I want to be there to show them and talk to them about what that's going to look like. So I'll be there in January. Then February, I either Disneyland, Universal, something like that. I'll probably be back and then March, I'm planning to go to Walt Disney World. So that's the next couple months. Something every month, doing something fun.
Busy. Do you have a favorite time of year to be at Disneyland?
Disneyland, it depends. Okay, the holidays are my favorite versus I love Halloween time, don't get me wrong, but the holidays are just so magical. That Snope on Main Street, you just cannot get that feeling anywhere else. And the music and the lights.
And you don't have to have a party ticket.
Yes.
Like at Disney World, you do.
Yes. And we get to see the parade without a party ticket. We get everything without
and the ride overlays.
Yes.
And Cars Land changes.
Yes. There's I love the holidays. So that's my favorite time of year to go, like to see stuff. like as far as crowds though, but I mean, like January, I just love to be there. And they had to have Lunar New Year. So they picked up on, we're trying to recruit and bring more people in. And they have like killer ticket deals going on right now for January because they are trying to bring people into the parks. But
And the holiday stuff continues into January too.
no, January like 8th, I think 7th or 8th. And then it really does come down. Unlike, I remember being at Walt Disney World last year, like the end of January, and Main Street, like the tree was still up and they were playing Christmas music.
Well, no, it used to be a hard out. Like the Monday
really?
after New Year's, it was like, it's a hard out. And now I'm like, why is it end of January and the Christmas trees are still, it's very bizarre. But I've been at Disneyland with it still being up. So things have switched a little bit over the years.
Yeah, it's funny. So anyway, but yeah, the holidays are my favorites. I'm super excited about this trip coming up.
All right. I'm excited for you. Well, this is a very travel heavy job for both of us. So I'm sure we'll cross paths in the parks at some point. But for people that are interested in Disneyland information, can you remind them where to follow you? And we'll link to it in the show notes as well.
Yes. Okay. You can find my website is DisneylandTourGuide.com. And that's where all my articles are about all my tips on Disneyland. And that's very Disneyland focused. And then if you are on Instagram, you can follow me at Magical Tour Guide, where you will find majority Disneyland, but you will find sprinkled in Disney Cruise and Universal and Walt Disney World and any trips I'm taking, basically sprinkled in with my Disneyland tips.
All right. I'm already following you, so I'll just keep doing all that kind of stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. It's been so fun to connect and talk. And like I said, I'm pretty much fangirling right now because I have just taken your advice for so many years and you have the greatest tips and information and you have so much to cover and you do it so well. So thank you for all that you do.
Appreciate that. We can compliment each other and help everybody.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Chantel.
Okay. Thank you.